Welcome back to the Mad Genius Thesis, where we try to figure out, like, what's the connection between creativity and mental illness?
Yeah.
That whole tortured artist thing.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to dive into all that with Hermann Hesse.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, his book's super deep, right?
Right.
Always exploring all this, like, inner turmoil and searching for meaning.
Mm-hmm.
So was Hesse, like, drawing from his own life? Like, was his genius, fueled by his struggles?
It's a really good question. And to be honest, it's something that Hesse himself wrestled with like throughout his whole life. In his book, Steppenwolf, the main character, Harry Haller, he describes himself as kind of like a creature caught between these two worlds, like the human world and this like wolfish primal side.
Yeah, I see that.
Totally alienated, like torn between his instincts and wanting to connect with people.
And like that whole feeling of being an outsider, not really belonging anywhere.
Yes.
That's like all over Hesse's work. So how much of Harry Haller's, issues are really Hesse's own?
Well, it's not a secret that Hesse had, let's just say, a pretty wild personal life.
Yeah.
Struggles with depression.
Yeah.
I even tried to, take his own life as a teenager. And those experiences, you can bet they shaped his writing, gave it this raw honesty and depth. I think that's why it still hits people so hard today.
It's almost like he poured all those struggles onto the page,
Yeah.
took his pain and turned it into art.
Right.
But to really get that, to understand his pain, we need to go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Like his childhood, right? What was going on with his family?
Okay. So Hesse's upbringing, how to put this?
Yeah.
Intense. Like capital I, intense.
Oh, okay.
He was born into this family of devout pietists,
Refresh my memory, Pietism.
So it's like a really strict branch of Protestantism, super serious about morals, lots of emphasis on personal piety, like being really, really devout.
Ah, got it.
And both his parents, they were missionaries
Right.
and authors. So that legacy, it was a lot for Hesse to deal with.
I can imagine. Like super strict religious environment, plus the pressure of living up to, your parents being these successful authors.
Exactly.
That's got to create some inner conflict.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Hesse always talked about feeling suffocated, like by the rules, by the expectations. There's actually this famous story when he was a kid, he threw his spinach at the wall and yelled, "In India, only cows eat green grass."
Seriously.
Yeah.
Wow. So like rebelling from a young age.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just the spinach.
Right.
I mean, he ran away, ended up in a mental institution as a teen.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of angst and like feeling alienated. So were these early traumas, I mean, did they fuel his creativity? Or was it more like just, damaging?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Right.
It's complex. On one hand, I mean, yeah, it left scars, real deep ones. But on the other, they gave him so much to write about.
I guess so.
That isolation, rebellion, that search for meaning, it's like it all comes from those early years.
Right. It's almost like he took his suffering and turned it into, like a language.
Yes.
A way to express what he felt.
Yeah.
And that whole theme, like finding your voice, breaking free from expectations, that's central to a lot of his books, right?
Oh, totally. And, one really powerful example of that is his experience with the education system. Like, he really struggled in those rigid, demanding schools back then.
Yeah.
It all kind of came to a head, culminated at the Maulbronn Seminary.
Maulbronn, that was like, what, training ground for pastors and teachers?
Exactly, like a pressure cooker for young minds.
Yeah.
And Hesse, well, let's just say he did not fit in.
He sounds like he was a bit of a rebel.
Yeah, he was. And all that clashing, between his spirit and what society expected, it's all there in his book, Beneath the Wheel.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
It's basically like a takedown of the whole system. How education can crush creativity, crush individuality, all in the name of making everyone the same.
And that's something that still matters today, right? Like so many people feel that pressure to fit in, to follow the rules, even if it means like giving up on their dreams. And Hesse's saying, no, true happiness. You got to break free from that. You got to find your own way.
Exactly. And for Hesse, one way to do that, to find that liberation, was through, the power of imagination, through Romanticism.
Ah, Romanticism.
He was super into writers like Novalis, who emphasize like the inner experience and how nature can awaken the soul. Remember that symbol, the blue flower in Novalis's work?
Yeah, like finding truth through personal experience and connecting with nature.
Yes. And that idea, it really resonated with Hesse. He saw nature as like a sanctuary, a place to escape from all the rules and restrictions of society.
So it's not just like physically being in nature, but also using art to like explore those internal landscapes,
Yeah.
the hidden parts of ourselves.
You got it. And that actually brings us to another big part of Hesse's life and his writing, his relationships with women.
Ah, yes. Complicated, right? Didn't he have like 3 wives?
3 wives, yeah, and
Ooh.
a lot of affairs. Intense ones, often short-lived. It's like he was always searching for something, maybe that spark, the thing that would ignite his creativity.
Interesting. And did those relationships, like the good and the bad, did they end up in his books?
Oh, absolutely. Love, longing, all the messiness of human connection, it's woven through all his novel.
Like there's that story about his pen pal who suddenly like up and married a publisher. I mean, was that real heartbreak or just, material for his story?
Honestly, probably both. Remember, for Hesse, the lines between life and art were blurry.
Yeah.
He drew inspiration from everywhere, from his own struggles, and turned those into, like, universal themes.
He was constantly like digging into his own life for inspiration,
Right.
using his art to try and understand what it all means, the chaos of being human.
That's it, exactly. Every relationship, every heartbreak, every moment of joy or despair, it could all become fuel for his writing.
Makes sense. But, he had to find his own voice first, right?
Yeah.
I mean, his parents were authors. That's a lot to live up to.
It is. Imagine trying to make it in the same field as your parents when they're, like, already these big names.
Yeah.
A lot of artists struggle with that, trying to step out of their parents' shadow while still, respecting what they've done.
How did Hesse deal with that?
Well, it wasn't easy. He got a lot of rejections early on, but then there was this pivotal moment. He met Rainer Maria Rilke.
Rilke, wow.
Uh-huh.
Another literary giant.
Right. And Rilke, he gave Hesse both encouragement and, like, some really sharp criticism.
Ah, so like a mentor who wasn't afraid, to be honest.
Yeah.
I wonder how that affected Hesse.
Yeah, it was a turning point, Having someone like Rilke believe in him, but also, like, challenge him to be better, it helped Hesse find his confidence to experiment and break free from all those old conventions. And you see that confidence, like, exploding in Steppenwolf.
Oh, exactly. Such a intense book. All that alienation, searching for meaning, and that whole, like, split personality thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible to ignore, like, how much Harry Haller's breakdown kind of mirrors Hesse's own struggles with depression.
You're totally right. It's
Right.
right there on the page. And, it's kind of crazy. Hesse actually wanted to put these raw, unfiltered poems at the end of the book.
Really?
Yeah, he called them crisis poems.
Crisis poems. Huh.
But his publisher, not so into it, thought they were, like, way too dark, too revealing, so they got cut.
Wow. So even in, like, his most personal work, there were things he felt he couldn't share.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what was in those poems, right?
It does. Like, what secrets were they hiding?
Maybe, maybe those poems held even more despair than Steppenwolf. Or maybe, like, some incredible revelation we'll never know.
It's too bad, really.
Yeah.
But even without those poems, Steppenwolf is still, like, this powerful, unsettling look into how messed up we can be as humans.
Absolutely. It's a book that speaks to that feeling of being stuck between worlds.
Yeah.
Like, you don't belong anywhere. And, a lot of people connect with that, especially, I think, creative types, sensitive souls.
I get that. It became, like, this touchstone for the whole post-World War I generation, right?
Totally. People were so disillusioned. Like, society had lost its way. They were desperate for something, some kind of meaning.
And Steppenwolf spoke to that. But honestly, that feeling of isolation, it goes beyond just one generation.
It's timeless, yeah. It's about what it means to be human.
Exactly. And Hesse taps into that, like those deep fears and desires we all have trying to figure out who we are, what's our purpose in this crazy universe.
Yeah. And for Hesse, those questions, they led him on this lifelong quest. He wanted spiritual enlightenment, something more. It took him beyond, like, the Western way of thinking.
Right. He got super into Eastern philosophy.
Yes. And his trips to India, early 1900s, they totally changed him. You see that influence, especially in Siddhartha.
Siddhartha, classic coming-of-age story, but with a twist.
Right. That Eastern vibe.
It's all about this guy searching for enlightenment, going through all these different stages of life, like giving up everything, then indulging in everything, then finally finding some kind of transcendence. Was that just like a literary experiment for Hesse? Or was he genuinely searching for something spiritual?
It's a good question. I mean, keep in mind, this was a time when tons of Western intellectuals, artists, they were all about Eastern thought.
Right.
They loved the emphasis on mindfulness, meditation, that idea that everything's connected. But for Hesse, I think it went deeper than just, being trendy.
Yeah.
He was really struggling, feeling lost in the modern world.
So maybe he saw Eastern philosophy as a way to, heal himself, to become whole.
I think so. He was drawn to the idea of finding balance, transcending that split between you and everyone else, finding peace within himself and with the universe.
And those ideas, they're all over Siddhartha.
Absolutely. It's a spiritual journey as much as it is a story.
It's almost like he was trying to create this bridge,
Yeah.
between East and West,
Yeah.
bringing those ancient ideas into our modern world. That's what makes his work so rich, so layered.
Totally. But at the same time that Hesse was searching for enlightenment, he was also getting really disillusioned with politics, with society.
Right, he was super outspoken about pacifism.
Yeah.
Especially during the wars.
Yes. And that stance, being against violence and nationalism, it made him a lot of enemies. People called him a traitor, a coward.
Wow. So his pacifism, it wasn't just like a political opinion. It came from something deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Deeply personal. He saw war and violence as symptoms of the spiritual sickness. We'd forgotten what it means to be human. And because he refused to, go along with the crowd, well.
It cost him. It's wild how even when he was trying to withdraw from the world, focus on his own inner journey, the world kept pulling him back in.
It did.
Forcing him to pick a side. How did he handle that? Wanting solitude, but also knowing there's all this injustice happening out there.
It was a constant battle, I mean, he was aware of the suffering, but he also knew that political action could only do so much.
So he thought real change had to come from somewhere else, from within.
Yeah, like a transformation of our consciousness rather than some revolution on the streets.
So he saw his role, his art, as more than just, entertainment or making political points.
Definitely.
He thought art could actually heal, awaken people, make real change happen at a deeper level.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. He saw art as this bridge connecting our inner and outer worlds, a way to touch something bigger than ourselves.
And that connection was important to him, right? For both personal and societal healing.
Yes, it was essential. And then we get to his last big work, his masterpiece, the glass bead game.
Oh yeah, glass bead game.
It brings together, all those themes we've been talking about. Searching for meaning, the individual versus society, the power of art to go beyond words and logic.
It's a dense book for sure. Lots of different interpretations out there.
Oh, for sure. But at its heart, I think it's about knowledge, truth, and what the artist's role is in a world that seems, kind of lost.
It's set in this future where intellectuals have basically created their own little world, Castalia. They've left all the chaos behind to focus on knowledge and art.
Yeah.
Is that Hesse's utopia, a world where the mind reigns supreme?
It's tempting to see it that way, but I think it's more complicated than that. It's not just praising intellectualism, it's also a warning. Be careful about cutting yourself off from real life.
Right, because the main character, Yusuf Necht, he ends up leaving Castalia.
He does. He chooses to go back to the real world, even though it costs him everything.
So it's Hesse is saying true wisdom isn't just about, knowing a lot of stuff.
Right.
It's about taking that knowledge and actually doing something with it. Dealing with all the messy, complicated parts of life.
Yes, you have to engage with it all. And for Hesse, that meant finding a balance between your inner world and the outer world, between searching for your own enlightenment and being responsible to the world around you.
So the glass bead game, it's a call to action. Don't hide away from the world. Find a way to connect your mind and spirit with actually making a difference.
It is. It's a powerful message. And I think it really speaks to us today.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, think about it. We're drowning in information. Social media's got us all fragmented.
Yeah.
And we're still wrestling with the same questions Hesse was asking.
Totally. How do we balance our own inner lives with all of the demands of the world, you know?
Yeah. How do we even find meaning when everything feels so chaotic and disconnected?
Right. But what I find so interesting is that Hesse doesn't give us easy answers. There's no one right path to enlightenment,
He's not preaching.
No, he's not. He gives us these complicated characters who are struggling with the same stuff we are, and they make choices, they deal with the consequences, and in the end, we're left to figure it out for ourselves.
Right. It's up to us to decide what it all means. In Rochaldé, there's that painter, Vergeth.
Oh yeah, Vergeth.
He's torn between his art and his family,
Mm-hmm.
and he does find a way to make it work. But it's not easy. There's sacrifice. And it really shows that tension, like that pull between what the artist needs, that solitude, and what society expects.
Yeah, that was something Hess himself struggled with. I mean, so many of his characters, they're outsiders, seekers, rebels, always clashing with, like, the norms.
It's true.
Yeah.
Like Sinclair and Demian,
Oh, yeah.
rebelling against the hypocrisy of, like, the grown-up world. Or Siddhartha, walking away from a comfortable life to find something more.
Exactly. And I think, Hesse's giving voice to that part of us that wants more, that questions everything, that doesn't want to be put in a box.
He's like, hey, embrace your inner rebel.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to challenge the rules to create your own meaning.
Love that. But he doesn't stop there, right? I mean, he also critiques those, like, bigger forces that try to shut down creativity and individuality.
Oh, for sure. In the Glass Bead game, he's warning us about knowledge that's all in your head. Like, it has to connect to real life, real compassion.
Makes sense. And in his essays, he even, like, criticizes the journalistic age, the constant pressure to, like, produce and consume information.
He thought it was getting in the way of actual truth.
And isn't it crazy how relevant that is today?
It's mind-blowing.
I mean, we're bombarded with information 24/7. It's hard to know what to trust, what even matters.
Exactly. And Hesse's like, hey, find some quiet. Make space to think, to reflect. That's where you connect with your creativity. That's where you find that deeper meaning.
So, bringing back to our original question, was Hesse a mad genius?
Right.
Or just a really sensitive artist who was brave enough to explore, like, the dark side of humanity?
Well, honestly, I think it was both. Maybe you can't have one without the other.
Interesting.
His mental struggles, they definitely shaped his art, gave it that honesty, that raw emotion.
Yeah.
But it was his willingness to face those struggles, to go into those dark places and come out with a message of hope, of resilience.
That's what makes his work so powerful.
Exactly. He's telling us, look, creativity can bloom anywhere, even in the most painful parts of ourselves, our wounds that can make us stronger. And the journey to, like, find yourself, it's not easy, but it's worth it.
Absolutely. And he reminds us to, like, embrace the whole human experience.
All of it.
The good, the bad, the messy.
The contradictions. Find the beauty, even in the brokenness.
And keep searching for those moments of grace, those moments that light up the path.
Beautifully said.
So, listeners, as you keep exploring this whole creativity and mental illness thing, remember what Hesse taught us.
Yeah.
Embrace who you are. Listen to that inner voice. And don't be afraid to look deep inside yourself.
That's where the magic happens.
Because it's in those shadows where the light and dark meet. That's where true creativity comes alive.
You might even find your own inner Steppenwolf howling at the moon.
Love it.
Yearning for connection, and maybe, just maybe, guiding you to a deeper understanding of, well, everything.
That's a great image to end on. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep creating.